So
David, let's talk about this proposal. Since we're talking about cross listings and one country taking advantage of markets in another country across the region, there's now a proposal for a Caribbean stock exchange, and it's been endorsed by the CARICOM heads of government. A company has been selected to lead the study, the feasibility study. That company is PricewaterhouseCoopers. And regional stock exchange, though, how feasible is it for there to be a Caribbean stock exchange? Do you think that all of them should just come together, so there would be no more JSE, no more TTSE, no more BSE, we just have one Caribbean stock exchange? Or would it be, I don't know, how do you think that could potentially work out?
So let's put it in one simple sentence. If you couldn't get the West Indies Federation right, how are we going to get a Caribbean stock exchange right?
Oh gosh.
I'm not fighting the Caribbean stock exchange. It would be good to have more regional cooperation, but you have to be realistic. Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados, based on their economic models and setups, they have deep capital interests by different investors and so on, so they can stand on their own as relative giants in their own spheres. But for example, in the Eastern Caribbean, they share an Eastern Caribbean dollar. They share an Eastern Caribbean stock market. Go to Guyana, they have a stock market that's only open on Mondays, and that's, I don't think it's been traded for like probably 3 hours good, and they have a T+5 settlement period. And on top of that, there are just other considerations that people need to consider, or I should say, they resolve. So the current settlement thing is one thing that needs to be resolved. So if I had a Caribbean stock exchange, how would that settlement work? If I'm buying a stock in Trinidad, would my GMB convert to TTD, or how would that work behind the scenes? Then we also need to look at the regulations not being harmonious. So whereas in Jamaica, a company can do a share buyback very quickly, snap of your fingers, Trinidad situation or the delay on the regulatory side has created issues where companies on the JSE, or I should say cross-state companies, want to execute their own share buyback. So Grace Kennedy and JMB Group took over a year, and GK took several months before their share buyback could actually start. And that was because, whereas in Jamaica, we don't have regulatory constraints to a share buyback, with the Trinidad and Securities law, which is actually their Securities Act, the companies have to apply to the TTSCC to get approval to their share buyback. And when that approval does come through, it is so long into the future, because I believe GK announced their buyback proposal early 2023, and it was not until late 2023 when they got approval to actually start the program. So whereas if they released on the JSC alone, they could have just started and just got moving. When it came on to the Paddy Croston TTSE, it became a constraint. So you have a lot of confusion that needs to be resolved. They've been trying in the past, to create this harmonious like structure. So, I believe to 2015, they had the same software. I think it was Avento, or I don't remember the program. They had a similar setup in terms of settlement times at the time. So, but then I believe settlement was T+3. So Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica Stock Exchange all try to, harmonize things. But in terms of the actual operation of that regional kind of exchange trading and everything, it didn't really work out as they expected. We've seen companies like JMB Group open a new office in Barbados. They have Trinidad operations. NCB Capital Markets has its Cayman, Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad operations. So, different Jamaican firms see opportunity across the region to grow, as brokers and in the capital markets dynamics. But there are just a lot of concerns that, you have to resolve from regulatory standpoint, currency standpoint, and also what I'd call governance concerns, but more, what I'd call the leadership concerns, because Jamaica pulled to West Indies Federation and it collapsed shortly after.
I've been having this debate with a friend of mine for months as well, a friend of mine here in Belize, because I have been trying to drum up interest in possibly developing a Belize stock exchange. This interest is falling on deaf ears. There doesn't seem to be much interest politically in doing something like that, and from the regulatory standpoint. And my friend who I've been talking to, who works in the capital markets, has been saying, no, Belize is too small of a market. What we need is a Caribbean stock exchange. And for many of the reasons that you pointed out tonight, David, I was saying developing a Caribbean stock exchange is going to be problematic. One, because the political will just doesn't seem to be there. The difference is, both of you have the bug, David. The differences with what was I saying? The differences with the currencies. Yes, the differences between the currencies, the differences between the regulations. It's going to take a lot of effort to really be able to streamline a Caribbean stock exchange. Although I would love to see it happen, because we would love to have opportunities available region-wide. If my company here in Belize wants to raise money, that should be a Caribbean-wide opportunity. That would only deepen regional integration and really bring the CSME a step closer to where we would like to see it. But unfortunately, CSME itself hasn't really taken off and has failed, met so many challenges in implementation over the years.
For me, Kalilah, the way I see it is that we need to just be realistic and work with what we have already. Try and improve regulation in each market to make it a little bit more seamless for business to be done in different jurisdictions. Somebody said, they think that their application to the TTSCC is still on somebody's desk. That had many years ago for, I think, a financial advisor, but a dealer of license in Trinidad still not resolved. You need to resolve regulatory concerns or delays in each market. And for me, I think we just need to accept that, hey, each of us have our own regional, or I should say domestic constraints. Let us work with what actually makes sense. So Jamaica is already the hot thing everybody's talking about, right? So Belize themselves don't want to develop a stock exchange there. Why not just list on the Jamaican markets? Why don't we just say, hey, we have a junior market, for example. Why don't we say, hey, Belize, how about, you create a law that allows for companies on either the JSC's junior market or the TT SME market, to benefit from a tax break in your home jurisdiction. These companies will still be able to raise capital, carry back home or invest across the Caribbean to grow. Because what are realistic? Trying to create this single stock exchange doesn't make much sense at the moment based on just all of these constraints, because whereas the Eurozone, has the benefit of a single currency and harmonized legislation to make cross-border business very simple, where all these different markets, one different laws, one different political will. Work out what you have. So the TTSC just moved from T+3 to T+2 last year. They might go to T+1 very shortly, like the JSC. So when TTSC, Barbados, and Jamaica on the same settlement time, just see how you can facilitate what I'd call faster cross-border settlement of certain cross-state companies. Because what I want to point out to you was that, and what's going to realize, persons in that raise FX in Jamaica through the stock exchanges. So let us say I am a person that wants to get FX in Trinidad. I can buy, let's say, 1,000 Great Canadian shares, right? That's what it costs me about 4,000 TT. I can then take that 1,000 shares and do something called an inter-CSD transfer, an inter-central security depository transfer from the TTCD to the JCSD. And if I do that, I can sell 1,000 shares on the JSC at $70 and get 7,000 GMD and I convert to USD. The fact that you have persons, going through this, what I'd call convoluted route, just to get FX, shows you that persons are willing to take advantage of opportunities to source capital to make profit based on their needs. So let's just improve the settlement period and that harmonization between the markets, so that if somebody says, hey, I'm selling JSC and TTSC, how fast can I have my shares settled from Jamaica's JCSD to Trinidad or to BCSD? So you will see to be really scanning this use what we have already and grow with it. I'm not saying Jamaica should be the home of everything, but we're being realistic about what's happening right now. You have new hotels, new infrastructure. You have an open foreign exchange market. You don't have any restrictions at any serious level to raise FX. So for me, just work what we have.
Yeah, we have a lot of comments on this topic. I'm going to take some of those comments shortly. David, a lot to discuss. I'm very curious to see what PwC comes up with in their feasibility study and what recommendations they make. They didn't have a timeline on it, so I don't know when we can expect this study to be completed, but I will definitely be keeping an eye out